So we have the opportunity to build differently, and we are going to be looking at that for the next session. So how do we do that? That is a panel conversation that will be chaired by Brendan Mashevsky from Mashevsky Consulting. He was on stage with us a bit earlier this morning. So Brendan brings over 20 years of experience in policy, operational policy and investment across education, health and research. He has a strong focus on improving services for underserved communities and bridging the boundaries across complex systems. And joining Brendan on stage, we have Emelina May, who's an academic staff member at Tūhura Institute of Technology and a registered quantity surveyor, education chair of the New Zealand Institute of Quantity Surveyors. And also Mike Grossen, strategic advisor at Open Polytech with over 23 years experience in the tertiary and vocational education sector. So they will be talking about system change in degree-level apprenticeships. Let's welcome Brendan, Emelina and Mike on the stage.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Oh, look at that. Wow. Hello again. Kia ora koutou. I haven't told these guys, but we're in between this beautiful whānau and the hoisin pork and some interesting sounding cheese bake. So we'll try and keep you entertained and distracted from the kai. So you know who I am because I've already introduced myself. And I've got the pleasure of chairing this session on degree-level apprenticeships and driving systems change. So thanks to both Mike and Emelina for being here today. This project is part of a wider initiative led by ConCOVE, and I just want to acknowledge Eve Price, who's been guiding our work. Where we're looking to work. We're working to test and develop degree-level apprenticeships. It's a new way, well, it's an old way, but it's a newish way in New Zealand to combine degree-level learning with structured full-time employment. And want to mihi our sister, our whānau from Ngāti Toa, with their identification of degree-level apprenticeships as part of the strategy that they're pursuing. So what are these things? They're really employer-led, provider-supported, and built on the principle that learners shouldn't have to choose between study and work. They should be able to do both meaningfully and start to build a career as soon as they enter the workforce. Today you're going to hear from these two outstanding individuals about the contributions they've been making to the mahi, and I just want to acknowledge both of you. You've been a genuine pleasure to work with and an inspiration actually as we've gone along, so thank you. We've done the introductions already, but Emelina, did you want to say anything else about your role and contribution?
Yes, sure. Kia ora everyone, I'm Emelina. Apart from my introduction earlier about my role as Toyo Homais, I'm actually still actively practicing in the industry. And with this morning's all the presentations actually very related to myself. As myself a quantity surveyor, and I'm going to pause here. Anyone know what I'm doing as a quantity surveyor? Show of hands. Anyone think that I'm the one on the road with a tripod? I'm very glad to see that we all laughed because we all know that's not what I'm doing. So thank you very much for your acknowledgement. But that's how I started with my career. When I started quantity surveyor, there's so many people saying, I know who you are, I know what you're doing. You are the one on the road with a tripod. I'm like, great. There's a very long road to go for the awareness to start with. And with that to start, imagine how hard for me to find my first job. It's not easy. And as a female, it's not easy. I can't even start from the ground. I can't even do labor work. Because the moment I pick up the phone, they're gonna say, I'm very sorry, you're a female. So, anyways, my color. I have many, many labels here. Fast track, I can go a lot on that, but fast track on that, everything that talked about this morning about infrastructure that I related very much, because I am working in the infrastructure, and it's very sad that there's not many people, not many quantity surveyors in the infrastructure. And I have to point it out, current program, there's nothing about quantity surveying about infrastructure. And so as nothing about renewable energy. And my last project is the geothermal power plant in Taupo. As a quantity surveyor, how's that ever going to happen? So lots of my students currently asking me, how can I go to your pathway? And I can't give them a clear answer. And that's why I'm here, and hopefully to share with my pathways with you and with your help, and hopefully our pilot will go very well. And so that's my practicing pathways, and I think I held the floor for long enough. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Melina. And Mike, did you want to say any more about your contribution?
Yes. Firstly, hello everybody. It's nice to see a whole bunch of friendly faces again here. Many of you I've worked with for many, many years. I haven't got round to everybody yet. I think it's probably worthwhile hearing my why. I'll be very, very quick. So I was privileged enough to serve 2 apprenticeships. I'm a trade qualified twice. I then joined the tertiary sector and started teaching, as happens. You know, you pulled out of the workshop, chucked in front of a class, and I found my home. And from that point there, I've enjoyed having the ability to do tertiary training and get tertiary education as well, and getting degrees and postgraduate bits and bobs and all the things you pick up as you get to my age. You know, you pick up quals as you go. And my why really is saying to, and thinking about my 2 boys who are both tradies, how are they going to have the same pathway? And it should be easier. And so the degree apprenticeship model to me makes it easier. We've got a lot of work to do. This is not simple, as you'll see, but it's something that I firmly believe in that New Zealand really should invest in. And we need system change, legislation change, and a culture change to say, actually, this is of value, and it's producing the people we need for our industries. That's my why. Thank you.
That's a wonderful why. So you can see both Emelina and Mike, you know, they're bringing a real grounded, pragmatic approach to what we're trying to do with the initiative. They understand what happens on site, on the ground, what learners and employers need, and how the system often falls short. It's kind of leaders like this that actually make this initiative work and are instrumental in the progress we're trying to make. So we're going to hear a little bit today about how the pilots are progressing, what we're learning, and what all of this could mean for how we fund, regulate and deliver higher education in the future. Before we dive into the pilots, and I've got a number of questions for Mike and Emelina, you'll have questions hopefully as we go along. Please do jump on the Slido app and ask away. And we'll have some time at the end before the hoist and pork to answer those. Before we dive into the pilots, I just want to briefly set the scene. So in New Zealand, we've got lots of work integrated opportunities. We kind of start at secondary school through Gateway and Trades Academy. There's about 26,000 senior secondary school students that access those opportunities for learning in real workplaces. That helps them with with completion of school qualifications and progression into jobs and apprenticeships. But the reach is still quite limited. You know, we're only talking about 1 in 10 of those secondary school students having that opportunity. And then at tertiary level, we've got a number of work integrated learning pathways that people can actually pursue. I mean, the most significant industry training and apprenticeships, there's about 113,000 people pursuing those pathways at the moment. Numbers bump up and down, but that's sort of where we were last year. It's the most intensive form of work integrated learning that you'll see because you're seeing the job, the learning, the assessment all being tightly linked. Then we've got a second chunk, which is those degrees with clinical and professional placements. You'll think about, you know, nursing, teaching, engineering. It's about 92,000 people. And then those placements, you know, they're substantial, but they're just part of the degree. And then there's another set of programs probably the bulk, around 250,000 to 50,000, 60,000 learners. For most of those degrees, the learners are doing perhaps a small capstone project, but some of that can be a bit more intensive or extensive if you're doing a vocational program. Who studies what also differs. So vocational routes tend to be more male, older, and include higher proportions of Māori and Pacific learners. Degrees attract more women, especially in the age cohorts about 20 to 24 at undergraduate level, and postgrads seem to be older, and they tend to be Pākehā or Asian. And even when you've got those work integrated learning opportunities in your training, there's a lot of finishing you'll know that happens to turn a graduate into a productive professional, that happens after graduation. Sometimes it's quite formal and structured, like the house offices for doctors, the provisional sort of supervised training that teachers do, and supervised practice for lawyers. And sometimes it can be quite standardised. But more often, it's quite bespoke to each employer, and the quality and funding of that finishing phase can vary quite a bit. Degree level apprenticeships aim to bring that finishing inside the degree by combining some intensive work-based, work-integrated learning with structured support. With the pilots that these folk are involved in, and our architectural design architectural technology pilot that we've got underway, we estimate that by 2027, together with the existing opportunities, so you can already do things that look like degree level apprenticeships in engineering technology, some teacher training, and some health professional training in clinical psychology and nurse practitioners and so on. We estimate that it'll be about 800 learners. So that's about 0.2% of the total tertiary education enrolments. So we've got a long way to go. But what we're trying to do with these pilots is understand what do we need to do to scale up what works, and to help employers get in the right space. So at a snapshot, we've got some early exposure at school, we've got these sort of 3 work integrated routes in tertiary, we've got a finishing gap to close, and we argue that degree level apprenticeships are one way to do it. So it's a simple but powerful idea. You've got learners working full-time in a paid role while also completing qualifications at level 5 or higher. It's everything from a New Zealand diploma right the way through to master's programs, and they're integrating learning with real-world practice from day one. That sounds really simple. So the programs aren't led by providers alone. They're intended to be based on genuine partnership between the learner, the employer, and the education provider. So the provider's ensuring academic quality and assessment, the learner's both a student and a worker developing skills, knowledge and capabilities in a deeply contextualised way, and the employer's leading that employment and on-the-job training. And employers seem to be up for that challenge. So we've got a survey out at the moment with the professional community for architectural designers in New Zealand. So far, we've had 90% of them indicate that DLAs are relevant or extremely relevant to their profession, and 62% indicating that they'll be prepared to take on an apprentice in the next 2 to 3 years. So we see this program's got real potential to widen access, especially for those who can't afford to stop working. You imagine, in your 30s and 40s trying to retrain. This creates an opportunity for that to happen. To respond to industry need by building job-ready graduates who already understand the workplace, and to rebalance the system so we're putting more value on applied learning. And they're not just about tweaking the margins of existing degrees, they're really about changing how we think about the system of learning, workforce development. And with that, I think we're all interested, enough of me droning on, hearing about how it's playing out on the ground. So we've got a few questions to start, but do please keep those coming through Slido. So, Emelina, let's start with you. What attracted you to the degree level apprenticeships concept?
Well, as I was saying earlier, that when I was a student, I find the quantity surveying course is very, very theoretical, but it is actually a very much applied technology and trades. And every single job I'm looking for, it requires me to have experience. But I can't apply a job, and I can't gain experience, and I start stuck in that chicken egg situation. I'm like, how am I going to break this vicious circle? I was lucky enough that I have actually found an internship, but I also have 200 other schoolmates that may or may not have that lucky at that time. And fast forward about 15 years after that, my students start to ask me exactly the same thing. And I'm like, oh God, it never changed. And it actually now getting worse because the construction industry is going downstream. I don't know how anyone think about that logically, but every single employers, when they think about quantity surveying, they know that we manage money. If they're losing money, the solution is to hire a QS, and they should be sorted out. That's not how we work, but that's how they think, and that's how the industry reflected now. Even a junior QS, they want them to have 3 to 5 years experience. How the hell are you going to find them? You can't. And my students have very struggled to do that, and that's where I start to think, what are the solutions? And if only we can be like doctors, 3 years practice at the first 3 years, and after that we do theories, first 3 years, practice afterwards. The employer have the confidence, the students have the confidence. It's a happy ending. And when I search online, I found ConCOVE, and the rest is history.
Thank you. So Mike, why did Open Polytech decide to pursue this model?
Most of our learners are part-time, and most of our learners are slightly older. We don't have many school leavers, many are changing roles, and many are in work. So combine those three things together, it makes it really difficult to juggle all those components. You've got families, you've got all sorts of things to put together, and it makes sense that you create a degree that allows you to get the experience you're getting at work and use that experience as part of your, not only your learning, but also your assessment. So the idea here being is that we try to speed it up and make it easier for them. So the Open Polytech has a drive to drag more of the workplace and more of the industry people, we'll be all seeing you shortly, into our domain so that we can be more relevant and provide more opportunity. That's really it.
Correct. So, Emily, you've got quite a senior role in New Zealand Institute of Quantity Surveyors. Do you want to perhaps just reflect on how NZIQS is contributing to the Toi Ohomai initiative?
Sure. So NZIQS, or New Zealand Institute of Quantity Surveyors, is a industry leading body who at the moment the only organisation who can register quantity surveyors. So any QSs who want to progress with their careers in the future and to become more senior, and that's where they can get registered. The NZIQS has been extremely supporting on this, not just talk to talk, but they are supporting from the beginning of the initiative, and they formed a committee and to support from different angles, such as we have representative from a national-wide consultancy, which is from the PQS side, and we also have the national-wide of the contractor side of the QSs as a representative. As well, we have newly graduated students as a student's voice, so we can hear. As well as sole traders, because in QS field it's quite common to have sole traders. So with those supports that from the industry's voice, as well as the NZIQS constantly advocate for the pilot, as well as the competency program, which I will be touch base later on.
Great. That sounds like a really important foundation for the apprenticeship to work, and I know a Building Institute Aotearoa, Pamela's here in the audience, has been a really important contributor to the work that you guys are doing at Open Polytech. Mike, can you tell us a little bit more about the detail of how the construction management pilot's going to work?
Yeah, it's a standard degree, so it's a 360 degree, 360 credit degree. It uses the first 2 years as as a diploma, and the third year as the degree itself. What we're doing is we're thinking about how the learners transition in and out of work and the time frame. So for our organisation, for a person to do a degree, it's not a standard 3-year degree. It's usually 6 to 8 years to do it because it's part-time. And during that time, you'll get cycles in the industry where people can be in and out of work. And what was really important to us is to make sure that we're aware of the learner's context so that they're able to carry on training if they're in work or not. And if they're in work, they have the opportunity to use that learning and that experience as part of their assessment. If they're not in work, if they're transitioning out, they can continue with a standard process. So really it's a fairly standard sort of degree and structure, but it's complex in the sense that trying to justify that to some of the regulators is kind of difficult. And if you think it's going to take you 2 weeks, it's going to take you 6. If you think it's going to take you 3 months, it's going to take you 18 months. It's not easy work, and it's not cheap, because what we're having to do is we're having to design 2 pathways, and we're doing this deliberately so that people can slip between one and the other and still have a continuity. And that's really important to us. Touching on one of the other presenters, sorry, I forgot who it was, that really shocked me, saying how many people, it was Catherine actually, how many people dropped out and then don't re-enter. And what we want to make sure is that they if they are no longer in work, they can still continue in their chosen trade. So anchoring that work has been the Building Institute. Thanks, Pam. It's really important that we have strong relationships with our associations, and we've been really lucky through other connections to make connections into industry. So for us, having the industry as part of the degree is going to be the success or failure of that degree. We'll be looking for partnerships to ensure that we've got guest lecturers and things at the service level, but also deeper down where we need people to actually take on potentially cadets. Because one of the things that happens with anything new, just as you've seen with the website earlier, not everything's right. And we're going to need to work our way through some of the problems we hadn't anticipated. And we're going to need industry players to help us figure those out as we go. But we are certain that we have a good product, and the learners are going to be doing really, really well as a consequence.
Fantastic, thanks, Mike. So, Emelina, I know you've already spoken about the relationship with NZIQS, but I'm aware you're deliberately trying to integrate the NZIQS competency framework into the degree apprenticeship. How's that going to work, do you think?
Right, so the competency framework that developed by NZIQS was the goal to, as a guidance, to provide a pathway for the QSs who graduated and for the QSs who progress of their career pathway up to the senior levels and the expertise. It is an ongoing, continuous professional development piece, but when we find out and when we partner with NZIQS, what we find is that is a perfect guidance of the final product, if you know what I mean, for the DLAs of our graduates. So we partner with NZIQS to say, okay, now you have your line drawn into the sand of what the graduate level should be looks like. This is what we can do is reverse engineer to go to what we should be provided in the DLA levels. And when we dive into those details along with our industry partners, we go through one by one of the skills, and just to name a few, which is quite interesting. The first element they have is interpersonal skills, communications, business writing, how to resolve dispute resolutions. So things like that, which is critically important, but being not ignored, but not being emphasized enough in the education so far. So that's one thing that picked up from the industry, which is really, really valuable. And things like that has been throughout to the competency program. And we have made a very good progress of identifying the overlaps and the gaps more importantly, and that's where we'll be aiming for, and give our students a very clear pathway from the beginning of the DLAs to the pretty much the end of their career, that when they decide they want to retire. One interesting thing and very important thing that I want to emphasize on that competency is we are looking at it in the wider skills of our candidates when they come to the DLAs. They're not necessarily to have construction background. Some of my students from retail, they work at Harvey Norman, that's fine. That means they have excellent communication skills. And we want to recognize that and into our DLA program. And that's where the competency works very well as well, is to integrate it of your life skills as well as the professional skills. And if we find any of those skills required but missed in any of the programs, that's where we'll be coming in as Toyo Homai to bridging that gaps as well. So it works perfectly.
Fantastic. Sounds like a really ambitious goal, but it's clearly where the profession wants you to head, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So, Mike, you've already alluded to this a little bit in your earlier conversation, but with this experience that you're gathering, where are you seeing challenges with the current policy, funding, regulatory settings?
The first thing is we can't call it a degree level apprenticeship because the word apprenticeship has a meaning in New Zealand that is not attributed elsewhere. So we're not using the word apprenticeship because, for regulatory reasons, that needs to change, in my opinion. When you do something that is slightly different from the normal run of the mill, you come up with a whole bunch of barriers saying, oh no, you can't do that, can't do this, you can't do that. So we need to make sure that we have, as I've alluded to already, really strong industry justification for doing it the way that we've anticipated it's going to work. So the other component of this is that I'll try and do it really quickly. The Open Polytech is not like a normal university, or it's not a university, it's not a polytech. It is a polytech. But what it has to do is it has to produce all the material, all the assessments, all the content before we open a program up. So that means for the entire 3 years of study, 360 degrees of study, we have to produce all the content, all the assessments, so it's very upfront loaded. When you times that by 2, because essentially that's what we're doing, it becomes very expensive. And then trying to justify that is actually quite hard. We're doing this because we know it's a good thing to do. We're also doing it because it's a pilot, and we wanted to work with Brendan and others, and we think that's probably the way that most degrees in New Zealand for the vocational education should go. So we're willing to take a risk. But at the end of the day, it needs to wipe its face. We've got to be sustainable, and we've got to work at scale. So there's a lot of work to go. I think there's nobody from TEC here, but if TEC could look into the purse and say, actually, degree apprenticeships are worthwhile, they're worth funding at a higher rate. From our projections, we're looking to be about 40% more expensive to operate a degree apprenticeship than a standard degree. And we want to have a look at the timing. We know that it's going to take longer, and to be more flexible and recognising how long it takes to do this work. So yeah, that's it really.
Okay, that all sounds really easy. What about from Toyo Homai's perspective?
From Toyo Homai, that echoing to what Mike just saying about the industry leading and industry recognising of the importance. We have a very close relationship with the industries as well as the NZAQ's support on that. We also recognise of the barriers from the fundings and policies that Mike has touched based on. One more thing that we also realise is the current quantity surveying course in the Polytech level will be at level 6, and we're also looking at how to bridging that level 6 to level 7 and above, so our learners to have a different pathways that they can choose and have a seamlessly transition. On top of that for the trainings and for the policy part, that we are just working actively and try to break those barriers. And we also knowing that our students do need the enormous support, not only for the resources from the industries, but also for the financial part as well. Like what Mike mentioned about his cohort more on a part-time basis. where I want to touch base on the such as the student loans and where it's not currently very friendly on the part-time students. So that could be another thing that we'll be looking at, how we can better support our learners.
Great, thank you. So I think we've really only scratched the surface of everything that's going on with degree level apprenticeships. I think probably now's a good time to turn over to the audience. We'll ask somebody nicely to let us see the Slido questions. I can see them, on behind me. So I think the most popular one is what's the defining feature of it being an apprenticeship rather than just studying while working? Funding, three-way agreement, or something else? I'll give the theoretical answer and then Mike will bring us back to reality. I think what we're anticipating is that they look very similar to current apprenticeships in New Zealand. You think about carpentry and joinery and all the rest. That actually, models like having three-way agreements where employers and learners and the provider are really clear about who's contributing what and when. They've got a lot of merit. But yeah, Mike, do you want to...
I suppose the key thing here is that the learner is able to use the experiences that they're getting every day, and really importantly, they're able to anticipate what's coming up next, and so they can say to their bosses, "Hey, I've got a course in X coming up. I see that's coming up shortly. Could I do that as a work-based version?" And they'd be able to say yes, and then we'd be able to engage and say, "Okay, what is this going to take? What do we need from you? What do you need from us?" So it's going to look a lot like a degree like an apprenticeship, except that these are level 7 students. They're much more autonomous. They should be looking after themselves, and they're typically in the 30s anyway. So what we're looking for is what we're looking at, we think, is learners that are probably more autonomous. There's a point at which somebody undertaking study becomes more and more effective and then becomes, a positive contributor in the workplace. That's the person that's going to be in that space, picking up the learning and doing the work at the same time with the employer. Hopefully only going, yes, that was their work. We have some issues around IP we need to sort out, but typically it's a three-way agreement, just like a normal apprenticeship. Except not using the word apprenticeship because we can't.
Evelina, did you have any?
Yes, I just want to add, so from Tūhura's point of view, what we see is, and also for the Connie serving this program, and if anyone knows about what QS does in that sense, a QS actually doing many, many different things on the construction site, and the majority of our business in the Aotearoa are medium to small business, which take 95%. Not every QSs will have the experience to everything that they learned at school, and in fact that they are more likely to be in one field. They could be in the client side as a PQS doing upfront, and they could be on the construction base during the construction. They could be at the end focus on insurance and the claims, or they could just be in a trade and specialize in one particular one, such as structural steels or foundations, which means that they will be learning in a very siloed way, and they're not able to have the experience to, or have all the exposures to the knowledge that they wanted to learn in the workplace. And Tūhura is aimed to bridging those gaps as well. So for example, every single trade, no matter where you are as a QS, doesn't matter which company you're with, you will do like payment claims. That is every single QS will do. But some companies will be in the infrastructure space, some company will be in the building, some company will be education or industrial. That part of specialized details, if that students want to pursue to different pathway, that's what we're going to provide it in that one, which is slightly different to apprenticeship, which is quite structured, very well defined because it's a trade defined. So that's why we're very cautious about using that term as well. We'll find a better name.
Sure. You can see the kind of debates we have at these groups we've got. I think we've got time for just quickly one more, and everyone's interested in money. TC's commitment to fund these things. I mean, we've had really strong support from the agencies to explore this work. I think the critical piece is not so much the decision to fund or not at current funding rates. There's a pretty compelling case, I think, for all these programs, and they're really well integrated with industry needs, so those stories can be told. It's whether or not they're prepared to fund at the kind of rates we think they need to be, because there's a lot of retooling, as Mike's kind of indicated. There's a lot more that the polytechs and others delivering these could do in terms of uplifting their business-to-business marketing, building or leveraging training advisor workforces and those sorts of things. But did you guys have any comments, Emelina, maybe on any indications you've had about TC support for what you're trying to do?
I kind of just to extend that to different things which are happening right now of the ISB board. So for the QSs particularly, because we spread it out too many different strands, and with the current proposed ISB board, we have, on top of my head, there's a few like services which we could be under, or construction we could be under, or design we could be under, or technology, or infrastructure. How are they looking at those ISB board differently, and how they're going to distribute, and how collaborative they will be, which I presume going to be very silo, which will be affecting how the TEC looking at the funding as well. So we, I'm wearing different hats now, with NZQ's perspective, we urge the ISB board to think this more collaboratively and consider there are many trades, just like QSs, same as the PMs as well, the construction management, they could be on any type of those work. How the funding stream gonna go and which board is more active than the other one, we don't know yet, but that's one of the concerns that we have now.
Sure. Mike, did you have any comments about funding?
Just quickly, I think TEC really likes the idea. They'll say, give it a crack. And then they'll go, oh, looks like you've done a great job of that in the current funding settings. See you later.
Yeah.
Is what I think is going to happen.
Yes.
But, Brendan's going to argue for us that we get a greater funding rate because we have to make sure we're sustainable. The vocational education system is going through a huge flex at the moment, and the word sustainable keeps on coming up. So it is up to us and to make sure that whatever we do is actually sustainable and producing a really good graduate. That's key for us.
Great. We're going to wrap up in 30 seconds. So as I say, we've only scratched the surface. There's a lot more to come. We'll be releasing over the next, ConCOVE, I'm sure, will agree, releasing an enabling framework that'll talk about what we can do within current policy settings, what are the quick wins if we're going to change some things, and what are the bigger changes that would really make this initiative hum. And then we've got a series of guides coming up, so guides for employers and tertiary education organisations and learners to help them kind of engage with the concept and ask themselves the questions that need to be asked before they get underway. And really work out how they can optimise their internal systems to make this work. So there we go. I think we're going to get kicked off the stage in favour of the hoist and pork. So. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
It's really, really fantastic. Thank you so very much, Brendan, Emelina and Mike, for a very rich, very practical conversation.
Thank you very much.
Let's see whether we can take some of those insights forward. Thank you so much.